Let's talk about it. Andre Acimon's raging age kink. Okay, this is my 5th time officially attempting to film this, so we're just gonna get it done. We're just gonna talk. Welcome to a sit-down, chitty-chatty little book talk thing. Hi. So, the books I wanted to talk about today are the books that I read this week, which is Call Me By Your Name and Find Me by Andre Acimon. And the reason I decided to read these books is because I read this article by Emily Rutherford, and it was fantastic. It was about how the director in the movie portrays pederasty in Call Me By Your Name, and he's really romanticizing and alluding to the classical understanding of love between an older man and a young boy. And so after reading her fantastic article, and it's so eloquent, and I was just reading it so jealous the whole time, like, oh my god, why can't I write this well? I was like, wait a minute, does the book do the same thing? Because I read Call Me By Your Name for the first time when I think I was 18, and it's been a few years since then. But when I read it when I was 18, I was just kind of like, meh. I was super into YA, and nothing against YA, I still love YA, like you can see all my Raven cycles up there, but the romances that I was used to reading, just, you know, obviously a completely different writing style than Acimon's. So when I found the book and everybody was like, oh my god, it's one of the greatest love stories of all time, and I picked it up and I read it and I was like, this is boring. And then I hadn't read it since. Okay, jumping in, because I watched that video of myself and saw me completely forget my point. My point was on my secondary reading of the book. I really enjoyed it, but I also feel so torn about it, because on the one hand, it is extremely sensual and atmospheric, and I felt like I was in the Mediterranean while reading, and there's also these beautifully, like, direct, insightful lines about that first very strong desire you feel for someone out of nowhere, and, you know, regret and memory and longing. And then on the other hand, there's this massive when it's a 17-year-old and a 24-year-old power imbalance, and while reading I felt kind of like. And then as I kept reading, I did notice there was a lot of alluding to a classical perception of homoeroticism that does very much show the author's biases and where he's coming from. So I think it's very interesting to study, and like I get why people are obsessed with it. It's just like I'm reading it and I'm torn. So yeah, speed it up.
Fast forward.
Call Me By Your Name. I wanted to make a video about that all on its own, so it's not gonna be part of this like little rambly chitty chat little moment that we're having together, because it's too much. There's too much information to unpack there that I don't know how to say very succinctly right now. But Find Me. Okay, let's rant and talk about Find Me, because I feel like we all have something to say about it. I'm just gonna say things that you already know based off of reading anybody else's review. So, I went into Find Me low expectations. Like, I didn't bother picking it up because, number one, I couldn't remember what had happened in Call Me By Your Name except for peach scene, bathroom scene, which nobody talks about enough. Segue. The peach scene, I'm like, you know, everybody has their freaky little things that they like to do. The bathroom thing, that's the one we all gotta be talking about, okay? He massages his tummy and helps him poop. That is a level of intimacy that I don't want to be at with anyone. And frankly, I don't think we talk about it enough. It's not wrong, but I don't like it. I don't like it. What was my point? Why did we have to talk about the poop scene? I think it was just, I've been talking about it a lot in the past 5 days. Okay, so now let's talk about Find Me. First, before we start, we really get this ball rolling, to be cliche, let's talk about it. Andre Acimon's raging age kink. I think that's what we can call it now. The man just loves the idea of an older person getting with a young one. At least now they're all at least 20 years old. How many times can she say at least in one video? I don't know. At least 4 times. All of the reviews I had seen since it came out in 2019 were just like, don't bother with it. It's all about old men, and Elio and Oliver aren't even in it. People are saying it's not written as well. But after reading it, I was pleasantly surprised, and I think it's because I was ready for the worst of the worst. Okay, so the book is structured in 3 parts. There's Samuel, Elio's dad. The middle one is Elio. Last is Oliver. Last to last is Elio. But I say 3 because you get 3 POVs, really. Personally, I think that if Arsaman had made Samuel's and a little bit of Elio's its own middle book and turned the Call Me By Your Name series into a trilogy, that would have made so much more sense. Because Samuel's section truly is fantasy on his part, I believe. It very much speaks of a man approaching his 70s, trying to explain why he likes young women, because the body ages but the mind doesn't. And really pounding that one home to us. Literally. Like, you know what I'm saying. It introduces the message of age and fate and regret, and like there's that one special person that's meant for you, and maybe that you just missed them at the time you were supposed to be together, or maybe the time you're supposed to be together, like, you know, kind of following the red thread is the basic idea, and you know the red thread, little red thread of fate. So he does introduce the topic. But could that topic have easily been introduced with Elio and Oliver without the help of Samuel and his 100-page fling with a 20-something-year-old woman who fulfills all his sexual fantasies and grants him a son? I think they could have easily done without that. I think if I were an older man, I would have been like, hell yeah, hell freaking yeah, this is the best book ever. And my point with that is I don't think that I'm the intended audience for that part. I think if I were much, much older, if I were a woman in my 50s or 60s, and, you know, looking at gorgeous 30-some-year-old men on the street and going, oh my god, you're gorgeous, I want you. Like, I think that's when it would be meant for me. At one point Samuel says, this is like an old man's fantasy. Yeah, it is. It is. We know. But here's our little silver lining, is that's actually not a lot of the book. Samuel disappears pretty quickly, and we go straight to Elio's POV, and that much of the book is more so about Elio. Another thing that I really noticed is that if you're looking for that sensual atmosphere, like you just want to be sitting on a lounge chair in Italy, sipping iced tea, maybe having a love affair with a gorgeous man, you're not gonna find it in Find Me. I think that's what ultimately killed the majority of it for me. And in Call Me By Your Name, you get that very like direct, insightful way of thinking of Elio's mixed with the atmosphere. Now you just get really big chunks of philosophy, and this is especially true of Samuel's section, I think, because he is the classics professor. Sorry, I don't know why I said classics professor like that. Like, I majored in classics as an undergraduate, and I liked all of my professors. They were amazing and very kind. I meant that more as like when people talk about classics professors, like in movies or whatever, they make them very hoity-toity, you know? So it's like, oh, of course, like the dude who's a classics professor thinks he can then get away with sitting there, and you know what I'm saying? Oliver is also a classics professor. What is going on? Although Oliver is not the same. Oliver's just having a bisexual crisis. It's just not what you would expect in a sequel to Call Me By Your Name. Which is ultimately my only complaint with this novel, is I'm like, oh my god, the potential is there, and you gave me this instead. Like, you know, when you expect to drink milk, but then you lift up a glass of water and like your whole body just goes into like, for a second, it was that. It's not for me. The whole book just wasn't quite for me. Also, rewatching this, have to jump in, This novel takes place in Rome, and then in Paris, and then in New York. And then in Italy. So it's like, I mean, I guess Rome is in Italy. And you were gonna give me no atmosphere, no feeling of any of those cities. So I'm a little salty Sally because I wanted that atmosphere. I crave atmosphere. All I care about is characters and atmosphere. I don't need the rest. Throw the rest in a fire. No plot could happen for 500 pages. Just give me one long Donna Tartt novel. We're just hanging out with a vibe. That's what I crave. And Call Me By Your Name gave me that. Finally, okay. Here's why you should pick up the book if you are a reader who loved Call Me By Your Name or are curious about what happens to Elio and Oliver and you just kind of want closure. Read the last 15% of Find Me, and I feel like the last 15% is what saved the novel for me as a sequel to Call Me By Your Name. It answers all the questions. It really is the book that everybody wanted and thought they were getting. You really could have turned, I think, even the last 30% of the novel into a whole book. And I think that's also where I was really frustrated with this one. Oh yeah, I already said, I think you should have turned it into 3 separate novels. But like, I don't think the whole foundation of that was even so necessary, because the end of Call Me By Your Name kind of builds that already. Like, you really do get this feeling that they never got over each other, and here they are again in the Mediterranean, looking into each other's, how many times can I say Mediterranean in this video too? Looking into each other's eyes, like, you know. Another thing I was surprised of, I watched the movie and I could not remember what the original ending of the book was. I think because, yeah, when I did read it years and years ago, I was probably like, oh, so they don't get together? Screw it! I just completely blocked it out of my mind. So when I read it this time, I was like, oh my god, that's an awesome... I thought it was perfect as an ending. I know some people hated it because technically they don't end together, but because I thought that they just end on a phone call with, like, sad Sufjan Stevens singing in the background, I was like, oh my god, this is like a Cinderella story. And I did love that it really ended on that note, like they could start over again. I personally really liked the ending of Call Me By Your Name, especially since it ended when they're in their 40s and 50s, and finally things were like, okay, no longer child. And how many times can I say that? I'm never gonna be over it. Whatever. But I think that's all I have to say. I'm probably gonna think of things as soon as I finish this. But those are my little ramblish thoughts about Find Me. If you like agree or disagree, please let me know. I know things are always different when you read it a second time around. I don't know. I'm just really kind of spewing over here. Okay, bye.